Hello everyone! At the beginning of March, I traveled to Hong Kong, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou. I happened to have some business there, and it had been a long time since I last went there. The last time I went to those cities was when I was a teenager. So, a lot has definitely changed. Back then, I certainly hadn't learned photography yet. This time, of course, I'll also be taking photos, especially in Hong Kong. Because for me, Hong Kong has unique scenery and character. A big city that has the character of an old town, both old and modern at the same time. Before going, I already imagined there would be a lot of walking. And every 2 or 3 days, I would move to a different city. So I already considered which cameras would be suitable to bring, and I chose this Fujifilm X-E5. This camera is compact in size and relatively lightweight, but it still has complete and advanced features. In terms of design, this camera has a retro camera look. So it's not too flashy when we carry it on the street, and it makes us look more like tourists. So when you're walking, there's a good chance you'll be ignored by the locals. Along with this camera, I also brought several lenses. But the one I use most often, the one I rely on, is the 23mm f2.8 from Fujifilm. This lens is also often called a pancake lens because of its very compact size, and it pairs very well with this Fujifilm X-E5. Maybe you're wondering, why not just bring the X-E5? Isn't that camera more compact and also more affordable? Yes, every camera has its pros and cons. What stands out in the X-E5 is that its resolution has reached 40MP. Yes, maybe you feel that 26MP or even 20MP is enough, but I think 40MP is superior, especially if you plan to crop or print large later on. Because I often use a prime lens, sometimes we will crop a bit, because capturing the moment is more important than getting the most accurate composition when shooting. This camera also already has a built-in stabilizer, so if I take photos at night or in low light, I'm not too worried. Especially when combined with a prime lens that has a large aperture. In my opinion, Hong Kong is a city that gets more photogenic and shows its true soul the later it gets at night. A high-resolution camera also maximizes the potential of the lens being used. Coincidentally, this 23mm lens is a new lens. The optics should be able to fully match the resolution of this X-E5, which has already reached 40MP. After walking all day for about 10 days, around 8,000 to 15,000 steps each day, I didn't feel burdened at all carrying this camera and lens. But I do feel a bit regretful that I didn't bring a zoom lens. Like the Fujinon 16 to 50mm f2.8 to 4.8, which I've heard has good quality and isn't too big in size either. The Fujinon 18 to 55mm lens is actually okay in certain conditions too, but that lens is a bit old now. Maybe on a 40MP camera it's not that optimal anymore. For the settings on this X-E5 camera, I just try to keep it simple. And the design of this X-E5, in my opinion, is really helpful on the street. Because even before I turn on this camera, I can see and also adjust the important camera settings, like adjusting the shutter speed, lens aperture, exposure compensation, and also film simulation. Unfortunately, there is no dial for ISO. Only on the Fujifilm X100 or X-T5 does ISO have its own adjustment dial. So for this X-E5, I set the ISO from the menu. Usually I determine the aperture depending on the lighting conditions and how much depth of field I need at the location. If I'm taking photos in low light conditions, the aperture I usually choose is around f2.8. If it's really bright and I want the background to be sharp as well, I usually use f5.6 or f8. For the shutter itself, I mostly set it to auto or A. But sometimes, if I want to capture a stationary subject in dark conditions, I often set the shutter to a relatively low or slow speed, like 1/8 or 1/15 of a second. I'm quite confident that the stabilizer in this camera will effectively help me keep my photos sharp. With a relatively slow shutter, I can save on ISO, and the image quality is still maintained. There's not too much noise and the details remain sharp. ISO can actually be set to auto in the camera. And like most other Fujifilm cameras, we can set it based on our needs and what feels comfortable. Because if we want to shoot dynamic street scenes, we often need a fast shutter speed, like 1/200 seconds or more. Here, I set the auto ISO menu to the minimum shutter speed that I need. I also set the maximum ISO a bit high, but not too high. ISO 3200 seems okay for this Fujifilm X-E5. Next, I just set the exposure compensation according to the lighting conditions and also my artistic vision. Because sometimes I darken a scene to preserve the bright parts or highlights, and sometimes to give a more mysterious feel. For example, for working conditions at night. Film simulation and several other settings are also really important when you're out exploring. And if you're new to using a Fujifilm camera like the X-E5, don't forget to try out the various film simulations using the dial on top of the camera. With this camera, it's very easy to change the film simulation because you don't need to go into the menu. You can just turn the dial directly and see it in the viewfinder or on the screen as well. You can see which film simulation is active. If you're not satisfied with what's available, you can also customize or apply a Fujifilm recipe. I will talk about Fujifilm recipe and also how to set it up in the next video. What I also like about the X-E5 camera is that it has a viewfinder. The viewfinder itself isn't really that big. And honestly, it's also rarely used because the rear screen on this camera is bigger and much more detailed and clear. In this viewfinder, we can activate the classic viewfinder mode, so when we look through it, the display is much simpler. The red text gives us the impression of shooting in the film camera era, and the composition can also be more accurate because the edges of the photo aren't covered by various icons and text. I use this viewfinder a lot when I want to take photos with more accurate composition right up to the edges, and also to help with stabilization. Because by bringing the camera close to our head, the camera's stabilization also helps. I feel steadier and also more confident shooting with a slow shutter speed. As for the screen, overall it's quite large and clear. But unfortunately, this screen can't be tilted to the side for portrait or vertical photos. If it could be tilted like the Fujifilm X-T5 for example, I think it would be even better. Because in Hong Kong, which has tall buildings and narrow alleys, I think taking photos in vertical orientation is really great. Okay, that's all I wanted to share, guys. Basically, I don't regret bringing the Fujifilm X-T5 for traveling to Hong Kong, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou. As for the lens, unfortunately, I didn't bring a wider lens. A lens like an 18mm or a zoom lens that covers wide angles would probably be more suitable for street photography in narrow and crowded places. For those of you who are still confused by my explanation in this video and want to learn more in-depth privately about Fujifilm camera settings, I can help. If you want to learn street photography, I also have an ebook guide. Please check the information in the video description below. Thank you, friends. See you again in the next video. Okay, bye. Thank you.